Golden Age stars who made shockingly stupid decisions. Hollywood spent decades convincing the world that movie stars were as intelligent as they were beautiful. But the truth? Some of the biggest stars of Hollywood's golden age couldn't tell left from right, thought Europe was a country, and genuinely believed you could turn off the sun to shoot a night scene. These weren't jokes. They weren't bad days. They were secrets, carefully hidden by studios for years. In this video, you'll discover the shocking truth about 9 Golden Age Hollywood stars who were famous, glamorous, and shockingly stupid. Jane Mansfield, the woman who tried to be smart in a world that needed her to be dumb. Jane Mansfield didn't just walk into Hollywood. She exploded into it. Platinum hair, impossible curves, a smile engineered to stop traffic. In the 1950s, studios crowned her the next Marilyn Monroe, but with a twist. Jane, they said, wasn't just beautiful. She was brilliant. Her press releases claimed an IQ of 163. Fan magazines said she spoke 5 languages. Photos showed her reading philosophy in bubble baths, casually flipping pages like a genius who just happened to look like a sex symbol. Hollywood sold the idea that Jane Mansfield was the total package. Behind closed doors, the truth was far more complicated. On set, conversations would slow to a crawl whenever Jane opened her mouth. Crew members learned to exchange looks, the kind that say, "Here we go again." She wasn't pretending to be confused. She was confused. About geography, about time, about how the world worked. One day, completely serious, she asked why the studio didn't just move California closer to New York, so people wouldn't have to fly so far. People laughed. Jane didn't. The problem wasn't that she played the dumb blonde. The problem was that she couldn't turn it off. She memorized big words the way actors memorize lines, without understanding their meaning. She dropped them into conversations at random, hoping they would make her sound intelligent. When they didn't land, you could see it in her eyes. A flicker of panic. The realization that she had gotten it wrong again. Directors adapted. Literally. One filmmaker created a color-coded emotional system just for her. Blue meant, be sad. Red meant, be angry. Anything more complex than that was off the table. Jane wanted desperately to be taken seriously. She believed, truly believed, that she was smart, that the confusion was just part of the act. When people mocked her behind her back, she never noticed. When directors fed her nonsense compliments just to see if she'd repeat them, she did, proudly, earnestly, unaware she was being played. That might be the cruelest part of her story. Jane Mansfield wasn't malicious. She wasn't arrogant. She wasn't lazy. She was trapped. Trapped inside an image she couldn't live up to, in an industry that profited from her confusion while pretending it didn't exist. Hollywood didn't want her to grow. It wanted her frozen, beautiful, giggling, harmless. And every time Jane tried to step into a serious conversation, to prove she was more than the fantasy, the room would go quiet. Not out of respect, but discomfort. By the end, Jane wasn't acting dumb for attention. She was acting normal, and realizing too late that it wasn't enough. Jane Mansfield's tragedy wasn't stupidity. It was believing the lie Hollywood told her about herself, and never being given the tools to escape it. Sonny Tufts, the man who had everything, except the ability to hold it together. Sonny Tufts should have been unstoppable. He had the face Hollywood loved, square jaw, broad shoulders, the kind of all-American look studios spent fortunes trying to manufacture. He came from money. He went to Yale. On paper, Sonny Tufts was exactly what a leading man was supposed to be. And for a brief moment, it worked. Audiences saw him in early films and believed the promise. He was a war hero type. A future star. A man built for prestige pictures and box office success. Behind the scenes, however, panic followed him everywhere. Sonny wasn't just slow. He was lost. Constantly. He showed up on the wrong sets. Not the wrong soundstage, the wrong movie entirely. When told he didn't belong there, he argued. Loudly. Confidently. Because in his mind, the logic was simple. Look at me. Surely a face like his must be the star of whatever was filming. Alcohol made everything worse. Drinking didn't dull his confusion, it amplified it. Simple misunderstandings became full-blown disasters. Schedules meant nothing to him. Professional expectations felt optional. During a war-bond tour meant to inspire troops, Sonny reportedly complained about waking up before noon, suggesting the military adjust their timetable instead. People laughed. Studio executives did not. The breaking point came at a charity event meant to showcase Hollywood at its most polished. Instead, Sonny wandered off drunk and was later found unconscious in a children's petting zoo, rabbits hopping across his body while guests whispered in horror. That story made the gossip columns. What didn't make the papers was what came after. When Sonny woke up, he tried to convince the zookeeper he was there on official business, judging the animals for a competition that didn't exist, at a time that made no sense, for a purpose no one could explain. Paramount Studios reached a point no studio had ever reached before. They stopped covering for him. After one especially humiliating public appearance, the studio released a statement apologizing, not for an incident, but for Sonny Tufts himself. They publicly distanced themselves from their own contracted star. In Hollywood, that was unheard of. On set, directors adapted the only way they could. They stopped treating him like an adult actor. Sonny was given one line at a time. Say it. Cut. Move the camera. Say the next line. Repeat. Scenes were stitched together like a puzzle built around a man who couldn't hold more than a few words in his head at once. Crew members joked that it was easier working with a trained dog. But underneath the ridicule was something darker. Sonny Tufts knew he was failing. He leaned into the chaos because it was easier than fighting it. Being the joke became safer than trying, and falling short again. That's what makes his story tragic. Sonny wasn't untalented. His early performances proved that. What destroyed him wasn't a lack of opportunity. It was an inability to grasp responsibility, combined with an industry that mistook patience for indulgence and indulgence for kindness. Hollywood didn't help Sonny Tufts self-destruct. But it watched. It laughed. And when the damage became too public to ignore, it walked away. Sonny Tufts didn't lose his career because he was stupid. He lost it because no one stopped him, including himself, before stupidity turned into self-destruction. Mamie Van Doren, the woman who wanted to be taken seriously in a world that never listened. Mamie Van Doren arrived in Hollywood at exactly the wrong time to be unsure of herself. The 1950s didn't reward curiosity. They rewarded certainty, especially in blonde bombshells. Mamie had the look studios wanted. Platinum hair. A body designed for magazine covers. She was marketed as another Marilyn, another fantasy built to stop men mid-sentence. But unlike some of her contemporaries, Mamie didn't want to be the joke. She wanted to understand the world she was being asked to smile through. That's where the trouble began. In interviews, the panic was almost immediate. Publicists would tense the moment questions went off script. Mamie tried, she really did, but facts slipped through her fingers like water. History blurred. Dates collapsed into each other. Certainty replaced knowledge. Once, during a press junket for a war film, she confidently stated that World War II had happened sometime in the 1970s. The reporter hesitated, gently corrected her. Mamie frowned. Are you sure? It wasn't the mistake that stunned people. It was the way she argued it, passionately, earnestly, with absolute belief. When told Abraham Lincoln didn't invent the telephone, she doubled down. Alexander Graham Bell, she insisted, was the man who rang the Liberty Bell for freedom. The room fell silent. From that moment on, the studio stopped hoping for improvement and shifted into containment. Public appearances were scripted down to the syllable. Mamie was trained to memorize 5 approved responses. No matter the question, politics, history, art, she was taught to steer the answer back to one of them. Smile. Redirect. Survive. It worked. Mostly. Years later, Mamie tried to tell her own story. Her autobiography was meant to be a reclamation, proof that she had lived, learned, remembered. Instead, it revealed something painful. Events appeared before she was born. People appeared after they had died. Time folded in on itself like it was optional. Readers were confused. Editors were alarmed. Those who knew her weren't surprised. Mamie wasn't lying. She wasn't exaggerating. She was assembling reality the only way she knew how. And that's what made her story so heartbreaking. She wanted to be smart. She wanted to belong in conversations that went beyond beauty and desire. At industry parties, she listened closely when people mentioned books or world events, scanning her mind for something, anything, to contribute. When she spoke, conversations died. Not because she was cruel, not because she was arrogant, but because the gap between intention and understanding was impossible to bridge in real time. Hollywood responded the only way it knew how. They kept the camera on her body and the microphone away from her thoughts. Mamie Van Doren built a long career by staying inside that narrow lane. Minimal dialogue, maximum image. The industry called it professionalism. In truth, it was avoidance dressed up as success. Message: Mamie's tragedy wasn't ignorance. It was the pain of wanting to be more in a system that only valued her when she said less. Tony Curtis, the star who could feel everything, except the meaning. Tony Curtis didn't need to understand a room to own it. When he walked in, heads turned. Dark eyes. Perfect hair. A smile that carried confidence without effort. In the 1950s and 60s, Tony Curtis wasn't just a movie star, he was movie stardom itself. Box office gold. Romantic lead. Leading man energy in its purest form. Audiences saw depth. Hollywood saw a problem. Behind the camera, Tony struggled with anything that required abstraction. Emotion came naturally to him, but meaning did not. He could feel a moment instinctively, but explaining why a character felt something was like asking him to describe a color he couldn't see. Once, completely serious, Tony asked if Shakespeare was the guy who wrote Dracula. People laughed. Tony wasn't joking. To him, acting was simple. You talk loud, he explained in interviews, with style. He wasn't dumbing it down for the public. That was the full theory. Louder meant stronger. Stronger meant better. Subtext didn't exist. Motivation didn't matter. If the line sounded dramatic, that was enough. On light comedies, it worked. His charm did the heavy lifting. His timing carried scenes others would have overthought. But when scripts demanded complexity, history, literature, inner conflict, the cracks widened. Nowhere was that more apparent than on Spartacus. Stanley Kubrick, a director known for obsession-level precision, tried to guide Tony through layers of character and meaning. Line by line, word by word, sometimes explaining vocabulary that most adults never questioned. Hours passed. Progress didn't come. Tony kept offering the same solution. Can I just say it louder? To Tony, Shakespeare wasn't profound. He was some guy with good stories who used weird grammar. When cast in a classical theater project, Tony eventually suggested translating Shakespeare into normal English so people could understand it better. He genuinely didn't see the problem. And yet, here's the contradiction. Sometimes Tony Curtis was brilliant. Not because he understood the role, but because he felt it. Directors learned to stop explaining and start pointing. Stand here. Look there. Say this. When given simple emotional direction, Tony could land moments that felt honest, raw, even unforgettable. He couldn't tell you why it worked, but sometimes it did. That's what saved his career. Hollywood learned how to use Tony Curtis the way one uses a powerful but unpredictable instrument. Keep the dialogue clean. Keep the emotions broad. Let the camera fall in love with him and don't ask him to explain anything deeper than that. And Tony was happy to comply. Tony Curtis proves that intelligence isn't singular. You can lack understanding and still possess instinct. You can miss the meaning and still make people feel something real. Sometimes, talent doesn't come from knowing why. It comes from showing up and letting emotion do the thinking. Tab Hunter, the star who needed the world marked in tape. Tab Hunter looked like a dream. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a smile engineered for magazine covers. In the 1950s, Warner Brothers didn't just sign Tab Hunter, they manufactured him. Teen idol, clean-cut heartthrob, a face safe enough for parents and irresistible enough for teenagers. The strategy was simple. Keep him pretty, keep him singing, and above all, keep him from speaking freely. Because once the cameras stopped rolling, Tab Hunter was often lost. On set, the confusion was immediate and relentless. Scenes were rehearsed. Blocking was explained. Everything would be perfect until the camera rolled. Then Tab would walk the wrong direction, stand out of frame, miss his cue entirely. Directors tried patience, then repetition, then desperation. Eventually, they brought out the tape. Literal X marks were placed on the floor to show Tab where to stand. Crew members hid just off camera, pointing frantically. Left meant left. Ear tug meant say your line. Nose tap meant look at your co-star. It wasn't directing. It was live navigation. Dialogue posed an even greater challenge. Tab memorized words as isolated sounds, not ideas. The sentence, "I don't want to go to the party," might come out stressed in all the wrong places, the meaning flattened into nonsense. Coaches explained. Tab nodded, then did it wrong again. What frightened people wasn't laziness, it was panic. In interviews, if questions drifted even slightly off script, Tab froze. His eyes would go blank, as if the language itself had suddenly changed. Publicists carried cheat sheets, movie titles, character names, plot summaries, just so he could survive press tours. Once, while promoting a film he had finished shooting just weeks earlier, a reporter asked about his character's motivation. Tab paused, then asked quietly, "Which movie is this again?" That moment said everything. Warner Brothers knew. Everyone knew. And yet, the machine kept running. Tab Hunter was profitable, popular, beloved. So the studio protected the product, not the person. Contracts were signed that Tab didn't fully understand. Career decisions were made for him, not with him. Managers explained percentages and long-term implications while his eyes glazed over. He trusted them. He had no choice. And here's the cruel irony. Tab Hunter wasn't stupid in every way. He was kind, emotionally intuitive, gentle in a business that rewarded aggression. He sensed people's feelings even when he couldn't grasp abstract ideas. That softness, rare in Hollywood, made people want to protect him. But protection became control. Instead of helping Tab develop, the system narrowed his world. Fewer choices, simpler roles, smaller expectations. He survived by staying inside the lines drawn for him. Tab Hunter's tragedy wasn't confusion, it was vulnerability. An industry saw a beautiful, uncertain young man and decided it was easier to manage him than to teach him. And in doing so, they ensured he would always need the tape on the floor. Hedy Lamarr, the genius Hollywood pretended not to see. Hedy Lamarr was never confused. Hollywood just needed her to be. When she arrived in America, the studios crowned her the most beautiful woman in the world. Cameras adored her face. Audiences were mesmerized. And from the very beginning, the industry decided exactly how intelligent she was allowed to appear. Not at all. Directors spoke slowly around her. Executives dismissed her questions. When she tried to discuss technical details of her scenes, she was patted on the head, literally, and told not to worry her pretty little mind. So eventually she stopped trying. What no one saw was what happened after the lights went out. While Hollywood slept, Hedy Lamarr thought. She sketched. She calculated. She took apart ideas the same way other people took apart machines. Science wasn't a hobby for her, it was instinct. During World War II, disturbed by reports of torpedoes being jammed by enemy forces, Hedy began working on a solution. Together with composer George Antile, she developed a frequency-hopping spread spectrum system, technology designed to prevent signal interception. It worked. They patented it. Then the military dismissed it. An officer reportedly told her she'd be more useful selling kisses for war bonds. The patent was filed away and forgotten. Hollywood went on treating her as decoration. Roles were chosen for how she looked, not what she could do. When she attended parties with scientists, actual geniuses, she was ignored. Once, even Albert Einstein dismissed her from a conversation, assuming she'd wandered over by mistake. That humiliation stayed with her. For decades, Hedy Lamarr lived inside one of the greatest misunderstandings in Hollywood history. Unlike the others on this list, she wasn't struggling with intellectual limitations. She was suffocating under them, imposed by everyone else. Studios actively suppressed her intelligence. When magazines wanted to write about her inventions, MGM shut it down. A sex symbol with a brain didn't fit the fantasy. Intelligence threatened the image. So Hollywood chose ignorance instead. Years passed. Technologies evolved. Engineers rediscovered her patent and realized its significance. The ideas Hedy Lamarr had worked on in silence became the backbone of modern wireless communication: Bluetooth, GPS, secure Wi-Fi. By the time she was recognized, it was almost too late. In 1997, just a few years before her death, she received an award for her contribution to technology. The applause came decades after the rejection, long after Hollywood had taken everything it wanted from her. Hedy Lamarr once said, "Any girl can be glamorous. All you have to do is stand still and look stupid." She wasn't joking. Hedy Lamarr's story reveals the most dangerous stupidity of all. Not a lack of intelligence, but the refusal to recognize it. Hollywood didn't fail her because she was dumb. It failed her because she was brilliant, and that didn't fit the story. George Raft, the man who said no to greatness. George Raft didn't fail by accident. He failed by conviction. In the early 1930s, George Raft was exactly what Hollywood thought a star should be. Tough, confident, street smart. He didn't play men who doubted themselves. He played men who walked into rooms knowing they would win. And that was the problem. As Hollywood evolved, stories began to change. Characters became layered. Heroes became flawed. Vulnerability became strength. George Raft wanted no part of it. When scripts crossed his desk, he didn't read them for depth or emotion. He read them for dominance. Did the character lose? Did he show weakness? Did he talk about feelings instead of pulling a gun? If the answer was yes, Raft walked away. One by one, the greatest roles in cinema history slipped through his fingers. Rick Blaine in Casablanca. Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon. Roy Earle in High Sierra. All of them went to Humphrey Bogart. Raft didn't see what everyone else saw. When offered Casablanca, he complained that the character talked too much and moped over a woman. He couldn't understand why audiences would care about a man torn between love and morality. To Raft, a hero didn't hesitate. And so he chose B-movies, simpler roles, smaller paychecks, one-dimensional gangsters who never questioned themselves. He left millions on the table because those characters felt right to him. Directors tried to explain nuance, motivation, inner conflict. Raft stared back blankly. If a character wanted money, he could play that. If the money symbolized freedom, regret, or redemption, he was lost. When Casablanca won Best Picture, Raft reportedly shrugged. He still didn't get what the big deal was. That's the tragedy. George Raft wasn't untalented. In the original Scarface, he was electric. He had presence, authority, authenticity. What he lacked was the ability to recognize growth, both in storytelling and in himself. He mistook simplicity for strength, control for power, and certainty for intelligence. George Raft's downfall wasn't bad luck. It was refusing to learn. Hollywood didn't abandon him. It moved forward without him. And by the time he realized what he'd lost, greatness had already chosen someone else. Linda Darnell, the star who couldn't read the words that made her famous. Linda Darnell looked like perfection. In the 1940s, 20th Century Fox treated her face like a priceless object, symmetrical, luminous, timeless. She stood beside legends like Tyrone Power and Henry Fonda, her presence effortless, her beauty unquestioned. Audiences saw elegance and control. Behind the scenes, Linda lived in quiet terror. Scripts terrified her. At table reads, her hands would tighten around the pages. Words blurred. Lines slipped away mid-sentence. She stumbled, lost her place, misunderstood meaning. Directors shifted uncomfortably. Co-stars pretended not to notice. This wasn't carelessness. It wasn't laziness. It was something she didn't have language for. Learning disorders weren't discussed in the 1940s. There were no accommodations, no diagnoses, only judgment. Linda learned quickly that admitting difficulty would destroy her image, so she hid it. Directors adapted in silence. Lines were spoon-fed to her one at a time. Script supervisors read them aloud, demonstrating the emotion, the rhythm, the emphasis. Linda repeated them like an echo. Over and over. Sometimes dozens of takes for a single page. What should have taken an hour took an entire day. Crew members learned to budget time around Linda's scenes. Not because she was difficult, but because she was trying to survive something she couldn't explain. When frustration rose, she smiled harder, apologized more, took the blame. Writers thought she was being demanding when she suggested cutting dialogue. "Do I really need to say all this?" she'd ask. "Couldn't I just look concerned?" Eventually, they realized the truth. Linda wasn't avoiding work. She was avoiding exposure. Reading followed her everywhere. Contracts, letters, newspapers. She avoided them all. Friends summarized information for her. She once told a reporter, "I don't read books. I watch them on planes." The reporter laughed. Those close to her didn't. And yet, despite everything, Linda Darnell worked. For years. She delivered performances that felt intimate and sincere, not because she analyzed characters, but because she felt them physically. She understood the camera. She understood emotion. She just couldn't process the words that shaped her career. In another era, her struggle might have been named, supported, accommodated. Instead, it became a private burden she carried alone while the industry profited from her face and ignored her pain. Linda Darnell wasn't unintelligent. She was unsupported. Hollywood didn't fail to notice her struggle, it chose not to understand it. And in doing so, it turned a learning difference into a lifelong source of shame. When you're ready, say, continue with Character 9, and I'll conclude the series with the final cinematic chapter. John Derek, the man who thought beauty was enough. John Derek believed he understood movies. In reality, he barely understood storytelling. He began his career in front of the camera in the 1940s, handsome, stiff, serviceable. Never exceptional, but never embarrassing either. Hollywood tolerated him. What made John Derek famous, however, wasn't his acting. It was who he married. Over and over again. Each wife was younger, more beautiful, more photographed than the last. And in John Derek's mind, that beauty wasn't just desirable, it was everything. When he moved behind the camera, he didn't bring vision, curiosity, or craft with him. He brought obsession. John Derek didn't direct films. He documented women. Dialogue bored him. Story confused him. Character motivation felt unnecessary. To Derek, cinema was simple. Put a beautiful woman in a beautiful place and keep the camera on her long enough. Everything else was noise. On set, crew members realized quickly that logic didn't matter. Continuity didn't matter. Emotion didn't matter. One cinematographer quit mid-production after realizing Derek chose shots solely based on which angle made his wife's body look best. When writers tried to discuss character arcs, Derek reportedly waved them off. "My wife's body is enough," he said. "Dialogue gets in the way." He wasn't joking. Lighting wasn't about mood, it was about skin tone. Editing wasn't about rhythm, it was about lingering. When an editor tried to explain that scenes didn't connect logically, Derek pointed at the screen and said, "But look at her legs." That was his argument. His films became incoherent, beautiful images stitched together without meaning. Critics were brutal. Audiences were confused. And John Derek couldn't understand why. After Tarzan the Ape Man was torn apart by reviewers, Derek reportedly asked an associate, genuinely baffled, "But Bo was nearly naked for half the movie. What more could they want?" That question reveals everything. John Derek didn't fail because he lacked talent. He failed because he lacked curiosity. He never asked what stories were for. Never asked how movies worked. Never considered that audiences might want more than desire reflected back at them. While other directors struggled and learned, Derek stayed exactly where he was, locked inside a worldview where women were images and films were excuses to display them. His movies didn't age poorly. They never aged at all. John Derek represents the most insidious kind of stupidity, not ignorance, but certainty without understanding. An industry built on illusion finally met a man who believed illusion was all that mattered. And in doing so, he proved something Hollywood often forgets. Beauty can attract attention, but without thought, it can never hold it. These 9 stories aren't just about intelligence. They're about image versus reality, about systems that reward appearance over growth, about people who were hidden, mishandled, misunderstood, or never challenged at all. Hollywood sold brilliance. Sometimes it hid stupidity. Sometimes it buried genius. Sometimes it confused the two completely. If this story made you see Hollywood differently, don't let it end here. Subscribe for more stories they never wanted told. And tell us in the comments, which story stayed with you the most?